odd. Like you just sit there and not look at the camera. There was no one to talk with awkwardly while everyone joins. It was,
there is this week.
There is this week. And speaking of which, this week we have to, the people are going to vote. They suggested last week that Andrew was better than you. So we may have a...
Who suggested that?
It may have been Andrew. It may have been me. I don't remember. Might have been me.
Guess we got to get people used to
the
voting.
People will tell us. The people will tell us. Okay, I see the
that.
live notifications. We'll go ahead and kick it off here and get going. Welcome, everyone, to another Unauthorized Caucus, this lovely and very chilly Thursday here in the Midwest. It has definitely become fall, so even when the high says 71 that day, it's not the same 71 as a few weeks ago. So we are donning up the fall time gear. And we are looking forward to elections, which is kind of one of the things that we're thinking about here today. So before we dive into the topic, let me remind everyone, please do like, share, subscribe. Make sure that you have shared this with a friend. If you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, the little notification bell to make sure you see the notifications of when these things come through. You can do the same thing on Twitter as well, where we're running live to make sure that you don't miss out. Because as we're going to get into today a little bit, big tech does not like us. And there's definitely an algorithm that makes sure different information does not get into the hands of people who are even looking for it. So please help us beat that and make sure to share it with friends and family. Also, go to phyllisschlafly.com. Sign up today, the top part of the banner, give us your name and email, and that will make sure we can get through to you with things that you'd like to know, no matter what, and no matter what platform decides not to let us share this with you anymore. So please like, share, subscribe, and especially go to the website and sign up for the email address. But on that topic today, we thought we'd have an interesting conversation that we haven't actually even had. I've kind of had this with another couple of people around the office, but it really is interesting to dip your toe into, because again, we all know what the problem is, but the problem's not identifying the problem. The problem is identifying the solution. And even though that solution is going to come from Congress, we're the ones who elect the members that go to Congress and our state legislatures. So we need to know kind of what we think about this. So this is something that we're just going to kind of prick the surface of it today. I don't think we're going to be giving solutions to anyone, but I'm going to guide you to a few good links. I know Joanna's got some things here. You can check those if you're in the chat. If you're on Facebook, down in the comments. YouTube, after we're done streaming, they'll be down in the description. Look down below. And let's kind of kick it off, because this is something conservatives should be talking about together.
Sure. So our topic today is censorship and free markets. And we're talking specifically about PayPal and just their recent information on how they're going to fine people if they don't agree with their purchases or their...
Yeah, they announced on, was it October 8th, I think? It was last weekend. PayPal announced in their new terms of service that they reserved the right to, or something along the lines of whatever the language was, they were going to fine users $2,500 or up to $2,500, something like that, for spreading misinformation. I don't even think it necessarily had to do with spreading misinformation on PayPal. It was just, if we see you spreading misinformation, we're going to go to your account with us and we're going to charge you money. Well, as you can imagine, that went over
They had a lot of backlash. Oh, yeah. There's a Newsmax article, Woke Companies Can Learn from PayPal, Censorship Fiasco. And Ryan is going to share that with you, but how PayPal is currently in an existential crisis and how the company recently issued an updated acceptable use policy, which was supposed to go in effect on November 3rd. And just like Ryan said, they're going to include a fine, talking about a fine of $2,500, which would be imposed on users of PayPal if said users transmitted speech that the digital financial service company deemed unacceptable.
Yeah, as you can imagine, within 24 hours, that policy was taken back. But this is kind of what kicked us off. It's a victory that they decided to take the policy back, but it's really kind of a fleeting victory. And I just dropped that link down in the comments in the chat. It's a fleeting victory because this is happening all over the place, and it's not just PayPal. From the trucker, I mentioned that this morning. We all remember the Canadian truckers who clogged up the Capitol, the big freedom convoy that traveled through. Go fund me. Sorry, the Bible's eking in here.
You're trying to
go send me here. Anyway, so there's okay. Now I'm confused. I feel like I'm having a Biden moment. Oh my goodness.
Oh no.
GoFundMe.
Yes.
Has been for a long time, pardon me, the most popular platform for raising money. Now people have complained about their fees and different things, but the big complaint, GoFundMe has decided to get woke, and they've decided who they will and won't use their platform. Even worse than that, with the Canadian truckers, they allowed them to take in millions of dollars. And then what GoFundMe did, I think, if I remember correctly, they basically said, yeah, we're not going to give it to them, but we're going to decide to spread it around other nonprofits that actually deserve it.
And GoFundMe, they fund a lot of different groups.
Yeah.
So who knows where the money could be going to? Places that we might not agree with.
That's the thing. Like, the market has come up. Give, Send, Go. This is where GoFundMe came from. There's GoFundMe, Give, Send, Go.
Yeah.
Other things popped up to come in and say, hey, we're going to allow these things to transact, but we're not going to cherry pick. Some came up and said specifically, this is for the conservatives, for the religious groups that are being pushed off of these other platforms. A marketplace has come up. But there are a lot of places coming up now that we have to discuss that don't have just somewhere else to go. I'm not going to use this company. I'm going to use this company. Because it's one thing if I can't use GoFundMe, so I set up an account with Give, Send, Go to take money for a charity. It's another thing when Chase Bank cancels your account and your credit cards. You could go to another bank, but we remember all of these banks end up, you trace it back, and there's a few big financial corporations that own most of everything. That starts to get a little bit more treacherous. Google, and there's the same thing in big tech. You know, Facebook decides that they're against someone. It's not just Facebook. If Facebook decides to censor an entire section of the political spectrum, that involves Facebook itself, but it also involves WhatsApp. It involves Instagram. It involves, you want to start talking about the tentacles, the monopoly tentacles that Facebook, that Google or Alphabet have. We're into some really interesting territory when this is where we've arrived. This is the problem. What's the solution? And you'll hear a lot of people say, we need to break up big tech. What's that actually mean? Because conservatives are not usually the first ones to run to the, hey, let's ask the government to get involved. I mean, that doesn't usually come off the top of my head first, is asking federal government to get involved. But that's essentially one of the legitimate functions we've used with big oil, with big telephone companies before. There's a purpose here, and we're going to have to address how we look at that if we're going to listen to the members of Congress and the state legislatures that are asking to get into office. In a month, we're going to vote them in. And then next January, we're going to ask them to go and do something about this. Well, what do we want them to do? That is a good, appropriate response against this left-wing monopoly and censorship, but is also constitutional. What do we do?
What do we do? I was doing a little bit of research when it comes to GoFundMe. We do thankfully have other options like Give, Send, Go. They unfortunately are getting censored on different platforms, but I shared with Ryan an interview that we had with one of the founders of Give, Send, Go, Heather Wilson. She was on Ed's radio show earlier this year, and it was just an incredible interview. Their heart for their platform for being able to give money toward different causes is great. They also are very passionate about keeping their platform up and making sure that they fight so that their platform or their website is not censored. So definitely check out that interview. It was from August 18th of this year, so just a couple months ago. And I really appreciate groups like that. So I feel like maybe one of the answers, and this might be simplified, and this is not the full answer, is to support groups like this, like Give, Send, Go. There's other ways to share these websites through text messages, through email, I would say.
Yeah.
Not even just on social media platforms. For a while there, a lot of people were pulling off of social media. I have friends who have never and will never create a social media account because of all the censorship and all the other things that are on there that are just not like what they used to be. So I think that would be one answer.
And see, that's the thing. That's the easy answer that we all run to and talk about. Yeah, see, even because that is, as an individual, as a consumer, that's how we would use the free market to fight back against people doing something we don't like, or people abusing what ought to be the free market. They're making it not free because they don't want to serve certain people. That's how we would do it. Stop using PayPal, stop using Facebook, stop using this and that and the other. But there's a whole conversation that opens up when you get into the world of monopolies. Like, again, I was talking about this morning. It's one thing if, oh, well, Chase Bank cut the account and the credit card, which this actually just happened. A few months ago, Chase Bank canceled the accounts and credit card of General Michael Flynn and all of the different things that he is doing. But you look at it and say, well, you could tell him, well, that's fine, go use something else. But the problem is, what if bigger echoes start happening? And this just happened yesterday. I'm sure at this point, anyone who watches the news has seen that even though he's not particularly a political figure, Kanye West has gotten into it because I think it was actually during an interview it was actually
asked. So General Michael Flynn, his account was terminated last year.
That was
Kanye West, his account was just recently terminated.
Well, a letter was sent to Kanye West's enterprises. I think yesterday this was made public. They said, we are no longer interested in doing business with you. In the effort of being fair, you have until November 21st to move your accounts, and then you're done with us. We won't be doing anymore. And remember, this isn't just Chase Bank versus PNC Bank versus US Bank. This is JP Morgan Chase that owns so much in the financial world. JP Morgan Chase, the parent company, is making decisions. That severely limits what other different banks you can technically walk into off the street and say, I would like to do business with you. We're talking about, we're knocking on the door of the world of monopolies here, which isn't something that you and I can just say, I'm not going to use them, I'm going to use them. That has a limited effect. So when we then say, well, what do we need to do about this? It's kind of awkward. You turn and you look at Congress and say, we need you to do something about this. Well, what do you want us to do? You're asking us to do something about federal business and intrude? Well, as conservatives, as limited governments, typically no federal intrusion is our primary slogan throughout everything that we do. But in this case, you go back and look, and I'm going to drop a couple of good links in here. And again, we're going to try to keep this short because this is an expansive topic that we do not have time to get all the way into today. And we don't really have the solution here. Take this, go with it. But when you look at regulating that, well, let's look at two things here. First of all, there's regulating an industry, but then there's the conversation about breaking up a monopoly. And I think conservatives should be a lot less squeamish about breaking up monopolies. This is something that has historically been done. It has historically been good. And it is, historically speaking, a legitimate function of federal government. For as much as on this channel, we always talk about the illegitimate things that federal government does, this is one of them that they kind of ought to do. And there's a couple of really good resources. For a long-term one, actually, this was a few years ago. John and Andy Schlafly on their weekly column had a good one, September 10, 2019, break up the big tech or the tech behemoths. And they actually talk about how, like, when we say that Google is censoring us, oh, we should just all stop using Google. Hold on. Let's all be clear here. Where Google's monopoly power extends, it's something that actually needs to be broken up. And it is not a fair and free marketplace. And I mean, isn't that one of the things? The federal government's not supposed to manipulate the markets, but our government's job is to ensure a free market, which means you stop people from cheating and defrauding others. You stop, and one of those things is monopolies. You break up the monopoly and then back off. Now there's a bunch of different competition lanes, and we're not here to regulate it. We're just here to break up the one thing that is unfair, patently is not a free market, and then let it go. That's what happened with the phone companies. That's what happened with the oil companies, and we've had economic booms after each of those because this monopoly is antithetical to our free market. It just sucks the life out of it. So breaking up the big tech behemoths. This is a really good column I would suggest you read. And then a shorter version. Let me drop this in here before I forget. A shorter version are radio commentaries. If you're not familiar with them, they run on several hundred stations across the country. But we also make sure they are up on the website every single day, probably before you get out of bed. So it could be the first thing that you listen to. 3 minutes. You have a morning podcast that's less than 30. How about less than 3? And we're going to give you something that you need to know. It may not be current. It may be historical perspective, but it is going to be enriching. I guarantee it. One of those was a really good one talking about how anti-monopoly is a free market position. It is, in fact, for the free markets and limited government to break up monopolies. This is an okay thing because, again, like we talked, it reminds me of the phrase Phyllis and Ed used a lot in 2015, 2016. They were giving conservatives permission to Trump. Like, it's okay to be for, it is okay to be in favor of the federal level breaking up monopolies. Now, again, this has to be done carefully, correctly, constitutionally, the right way. Not that we should ever trust federal government to do it the right way without extreme transparency and supervision. But it's okay. It is okay to feel that way. So, thank you. I see someone here saying this is a helpful conversation distinction. See, again, we don't even have solutions, but this is a conversation that we all ought to be having because, again, we're going to ask our elected leaders to do this kind of stuff. So we need to know what we think so that we can kind of hold them accountable. I'm not going to put you back in office. I'm going to email my congressman about this one because I think this and feel like we're going the wrong direction with this. These are things that we need to know for ourselves. So here, anti-monopoly, and I was just going to repeat a couple of things from this. Bear with me as we post these things. And again, everyone, thank you for joining us every week and bearing with us as we've changed this and morphed it a little bit, trying to get all the links out there everywhere, chat, description, so that everyone can get to it. But this, the anti-monopoly is a free market position. You know, that's the thing. When you go and look at it, the kind of the libertarian position, which has become a little bit of the conservative position just because of how bad federal power has been abused. It's just our nature to cringe against investigations and the government having antitrust suits because it has so often been abused. But there is a big argument that it is a conservative approach, not to regulate corporations necessarily, but to break up monopolies and then get out of the way. Because with a monopoly, there is a forced disparity where the middle class just disappears because so much power is concentrated in such area. And I mean, it really does end up coming down to state economies and individual people. It's really incredible. And I dropped that down in here. It gives a little historical perspective from the Sherman Act, which was 1890 when antitrust laws first kind of came onto the scene. And then in 1911, there was a big oil bust up. And then I forget when. Do you remember when? It was before either of our lifetimes, we can admit. The telephone companies were broken up. I think that was in the 70s or the 80s. I
don't know.
Anyway, you and I wouldn't have the cell phone and the comparative plans that we've been able to shop for our whole lives if they hadn't broken up the telephone companies, quite frankly. So there's a lot to it. There's a big discussion to be had here. So this is as it comes more and more, I think that this is going to really start mattering to people. And I guess this is just my kind of closing, winding down thought. It's all really bad when they're censoring what you can and can't see online, when they're censoring what you can and can't say online. But I mean, we can go on living our lives without social media to a certain extent. Now, if, like I said, what if the phone company decided to stop letting you communicate with other people? You know, what's the argument about public utility versus private company when it comes to a platform with 2 billion people on it?
Credit cards at.
Yeah, well, exactly. And that's the thing. Once we dive into the financial world, I think now everyone starts paying a lot more attention because it's not just what you would arguably very political figures like General Michael Flynn. Kanye West. I mean, Kanye West says one nasty thing about abortion being sin, and I don't like hypersexualization of, you know, women in clothing ads. And all of a sudden, J.P. Morgan Chase is cutting his cards.
Well, he wore White Lives Matter.
I know the White Lives. Heaven forbid we talk about race and sexuality from a biblical standpoint. But I mean, Kanye West is no Mike Flynn. Like that, one of these makes sense that it would draw the ire of any politically motivated organization. But Kanye, I mean, anyone who dissents will be silenced. And once that starts happening financially, I think that's the point when people really turn over and say, wait a minute. I'm going to pay attention to this now because this is no good. You're coming for my money. Like you're going to take away my money if I don't agree with whatever agenda you tell me I have to agree with.
Yeah.
That's bonkers.
Maybe you have a question about this topic. You can leave that in the comments below, or you could email us at info@phyllisschlafly.com. Maybe you have some articles or some solutions or some people who are running for office this fall that you think that we should keep an eye on. That would be really good to help in this area that we were talking about with censorship and the free market. And then also, maybe you would like to vote on if you would rather have Andrew or I as the co-host of the show, and you can send us that as well. But definitely leave any questions or comments about this topic, because this is something that we are definitely not going to be, that we're going to be talking about for a long time, I imagine.
And I mean, we've like I said, with the financial sector coming into the censorship, I think that the conversation in earnest has really just begun because I mean, this is, and while we were here, Gwen, our archivist and does a lot of work on social media online, pulling things, she just sent me another link. Hong Kong Free Press was reporting that PayPal Hong Kong is halting payments to pro-democracy groups there, citing excessive risks, literally stopping the payments to dissenters against the government. And PayPal's complicit in it. I mean, come on. This is a conversation that is only just beginning because it's so much more than big tech. Now it's big money. It's big finance that's getting involved. So like Joanna said, please participate in a discussion with us. If there are good candidates who have solutions on this, it sounds like they are both willing to be aggressive against this kind of thing, but also constitutional in their mindset and their values. Put them on our radar, please. If there's good organizations that are doing work in this is something that affects all of us. And it's something that all of us need to have the conversation about, and ongoing conversations about, and need to start doing something about it. So
yeah,
be in touch, please, because this is a biggie, and we don't have the one size fits all answer or solution just yet.
Thank you so much for joining our weekly Unauthorized Caucus. Again, if you have any questions or comments, leave those on any of our platforms in the comments below: YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, wherever it might be that you're watching us at. Go ahead and share this video with your friends and family, and do not forget to join us again next week on Thursday, same time, same place, for our weekly Unauthorized Caucus. Thank you, everyone.